My name is Lena Patel, and at 20 years old, I learned that the person who called himself my protector had been quietly rooting for my failure. I should have been relieved after nailing my differential equations exam and sliding my notes into a binder that snapped shut like a door. But instead, I felt that low, nauseous drag that tells you a storm is already over your roof. My stepdad, Rick, had laughed at breakfast and said, "College is wasted on ungrateful girls," right before he folded the paper and left for work. And in that moment, I realized I'd been measuring my worth in a house where the ruler bent around his expectations. He wasn't a villain in a movie. Real antagonists don't monologue. They make jokes that crowd out your oxygen. They call their sabotage concern. They rearrange the furniture of your life until you keep bumping into the same corner. If you've ever felt undermined by people who should be your safety net, hit that like button right now and subscribe to join thousands of others who know what it's like when your own living room turns into a courtroom and the prosecution sleeps down the hall. Your support means everything as I share what happened next. Let me tell you how this all started. I'm a sophomore at The Ohio State University in Columbus, on the pre-law track with a double major in political science and economics. The kind of student who collects color-coded tabs like trophies and who knows the registrar's deadlines better than the latest campus gossip. I keep a 3.92 GPA taped to my dorm mirror in black marker, like a dare. To me, from me. But most nights I sleep at home in a 2-bedroom apartment off North High Street because rent plus tuition is a math problem you can't solve with optimism. Mom, Malini, works nights as a critical care nurse at Riverside Methodist. My little brother Kieran is 14 and keeps his algebra notes lined up like soldiers in a parade. Rick moved in 2 years ago with a toolbox, opinions about everything, and a habit of turning advice into law. Money hums under everything. My annual textbook and software costs hover around $2,500, which I cover with a patchwork. A Pell Grant of $6,895, a campus scholarship of $3,000, and work study capped at $2,400. Every purchase has a receipt. Every receipt goes into a binder. It started as organization. It became armor. When Rick moved in, so did his commandments. Don't waste money on useless classes, don't question the man who pays the electric bill, don't expect exceptions. I decided then to keep proof of everything: bus passes, bursar statements, emails. I didn't know what war I was preparing for. I only knew that in our house, proof felt like a language the loudest person might have to respect. I chose pre-law not because I love courtroom dramas, though I could recite half of Legally Blonde on a dare, but because I have always been sick of watching people get steamrolled in quiet rooms. At Ohio State, my favorite courses are constitutional law with Dr. Lynn Nguyen and law and economics, ECON 4840, with Professor Whitaker. I tutor first years in the Writing Center, log hours at the campus legal aid clinic, and spend more time in Thompson Library than in my own kitchen. My calendar looks like a stained glass window of responsibilities. My life is the light that gets through. I work 20 hours a week at the library, reshelving books for $14.25 an hour, and keep a mug of highlighters on my desk, like flowers that never die. I am good at the marathon of school. I am good at choosing the right hill to die on. I am not good at pretending that contempt doesn't leave fingerprints. Minor dismissals turn to habits. Last September, Rick forgot to pass along a letter about a scholarship info session and told me I should stop expecting hand-delivered opportunities. In October, he offered to review my resume and returned it with half the bullet points deleted because no one likes a show-off. In November, he told relatives at dinner that I was taking easy classes, and I sat there chewed thin by the need to defend my worth without ruining the meal. When the bus was late and I asked for a ride, he leaned on the horn like an alarm clock and shouted, "Hurry up!" as if being seen moving slowly would confirm his theory that college had made me lazy. Mom would rub the bridge of her nose and say, "Please, not tonight," because she works with ventilators and intubations and the word stat. And the last thing she needs at home is more emergencies, even the emotional kind. Warnings arrived like notes slid under a door. My best friend Bree said, I don't like how he talks to you. My neighbor Anya said, You look like you're sleeping inside a thought you can't stop thinking. Mom would squeeze my hand and say, Focus on your books. I'll keep the peace. I tried. I studied with earplugs and cooked dinner on my nights because food mutes fights. Finals week in spring 2023 arrived like an alarm that never fully turns off. My phone calendar was a grid of red blocks. Econ 4840 on Monday at 8 a.m., Politsk 4132 on Wednesday at noon, and a policy lab presentation on Friday. Kieran quizzed me between his algebra packets. Mom picked up overtime. Rick declared a curfew the night before my econ exam. At 11:38 p.m., I found the chain latched. Curfew, he said from the shadowed hallway. We've never had one. I slept on the couch and woke up with my backpack strap digging into my shoulder like a second spine. I took the exam anyway and wrote about market failures with a steadiness I did not feel. When I came home that afternoon, my backpack had been unzipped and my index cards were on the floor like a snowfall that I had to clean up before it melted into chaos. The scholarship that mattered most was the Scarlet and Gray Full Ride, a unicorn among scholarships whispered in group chats like a myth. It covers tuition, fees, housing, and a $2,000 yearly book stipend, valued around $28,000 a year, renewable for 4 if you keep a 3.5 GPA, complete community service, and demonstrate commitment to ethical leadership. You are precisely the kind of student they made it for, Dr. Nguyen told me in January. I submitted my application on March 14th at 11:58 p.m. after reworking the essay 10 times and recording the 2-minute video twice in a borrowed blazer from Bree. I filmed it in a study room on the 3rd floor of Thompson Library under lights the color of cold milk. I looked into the camera and said, My name is Lena Patel, and I believe the law is a promise we make to the vulnerable. And when I hit submit, I felt like I'd tossed a message in a bottle into a sea that sometimes eats boats. By April, the water in our apartment ran hotter with tension. Rick picked up a thrift store receipt for the blazer, $10, and held it like proof of vanity. You think you're better than us now? He asked. I said nothing because sometimes silence is the only thing that won't be turned against you. The Saturday before finals, he shook an envelope from the Office of Financial Aid at me and made me say, please, before he handed it over. It was a boilerplate SAP reminder I already understood. I took the letter to my room and slid it into a sleeve in the binder marked Financial Aid, because documentation is both ritual and raft. On Friday afternoon, rain dragged chains across the Columbus sky, while my lab group presented our eviction filing project in a classroom that smelled like dry markers. We packed up shaking with relief. At 3:45 p.m., as I stood near the Ohio Union window, watching the storm bruise the horizon, my phone lit with a 614 number. This is Lena, I answered, stepping into an alcove that smelled like coffee. Hi Lena, this is Sarah from the Ohio State Office of Scholarships and Student Aid, the voice said, warm and exact. I pressed my palm to the glass. We're calling with some good news about your application for the Scarlet and Gray Full Ride. The world tilted. I'm listening, I said, trying to sound like a person who hears good news all the time and doesn't immediately start counting the ways it could be taken away. Before we go further, she continued, we need to verify a few details and schedule your finalist interview for Monday at 10 a.m. in Bricker Hall, room 204. You'll receive an email in the next 5 minutes with the confirmation and a list of documents, transcripts, an update on your community service hours, and a letter from your faculty recommender, Dr. Nguyen. I swallowed a gasp. I can be there, I said. Thank you. At 3:50 p.m., the email arrived, exactly as promised subject line, Scarlet and Gray Full Ride finalist interview. On the bus home, the rain slackened to a whisper. I rehearsed how I would tell Mom. I rehearsed how I would survive Rick's reaction. I decided to put the news in the kitchen, a place so often a tribunal, and make it a dance floor for 1 minute. When I walked in, the television blared a game show. Rick muted it without looking away. Control the sound, control the scene. I have news, I said. I'm a finalist for a full-ride interview on Monday. Mom's face broke into light. Lena, she said, pulling me into a hug that smelled like lemon cleaner and hope. Rick said, so, it's not a sure thing. It's a finalist interview, I said. I made it to the last round. He nodded, slow. Interviews are just chances to judge whether people are good at pretending, he said. Don't get your hopes up. Mom looked at him like he had spoken in a language made entirely of interruptions. I ate dinner standing at the counter, spooning rice and dal, while Kieran hovered at the doorway like excitement with hair. I'll run mock questions, he said. Deal, I told him, and the word tasted like oxygen. Rick cleared his throat. Remember, he said, those people like humility. None of that bragging you put on those applications. It took me a second to realize he meant the personality I had grown to survive him. Measured, precise, careful with facts. I washed dishes with Mom while Kieran read from a list he titled, Likely Committee Questions. And for an hour the house felt almost ordinary, as if the furniture had moved back where it belonged. Documentation wasn't a new habit, it was an heirloom. My grandmother kept a notebook of wages and debts in neat columns when she cleaned houses, and Mom keeps a binder of every performance review she's earned. I keep receipts, print emails, and record short videos on my phone after incidents. Date, time, what was said. April 3rd, 10:12 p.m. Rick locked the chain, slept on couch. Not for revenge, for sanity. For a record that couldn't be argued into smoke. At 11:07 p.m., the house hummed with ordinary night noises, Kieran's soft snores, the washing machine spinning, the neighbor's music a thin heartbeat through the wall. I went to the kitchen for water and found Rick at the table with my backpack open, his fingers riffling through the inner pocket where I keep my student ID and bus pass. Something inside me went quiet, then sharp. What are you doing? I asked, voice level as a ruler. He didn't look up. Making sure you're not hiding bills, he said. I don't hide bills, I said. He smiled without his eyes. Everyone hides something. The next day I lived inside preparation. I biked to campus, queued up a playlist called Courtroom in my head, and let Bree and our friend Mateo fire curveball questions until my answers felt less like memorized lines and more like reflex. When I got home at dusk, the coffee table held a stack of opened mail, my name on 2 envelopes with opened by mistake in Rick's handwriting. Heat rose in me with edges. I slid them into my bag without a word. Interview tomorrow, he said, clicking the TV off. Don't embarrass us. We, United States. The words felt like a costume he'd thrown over me without asking if it fit. At 9:26 p.m., while I was refining a paragraph titled, Why Ethical Leadership Matters to Me, my phone pinged with a new message. The subject line was harmless, financial aid follow-up. But the sender made my chest go cold. Sarah from the Office of Scholarships. Hi, Lena, it began. As part of our routine verification process, we attempted to reach your listed family contact to confirm your current financial situation. Unfortunately, he informed us that you are no longer enrolled due to academic and behavioral issues, and that the university should save its resources for students who actually deserve them. Please reply to confirm your status so we can proceed appropriately. I read it twice, then a third time, each pass stripping another layer of disbelief. The listed family contact. He. Behavioral issues. I scrolled to the application file I'd submitted in March and saw what I had not noticed because I had been rushing. Beneath family contact was Rick's name and his number, the default I had let autofill because it was easier that night. My skin crawled the way it does when you realize the window you thought was closed has been open the whole time. I opened my evidence drawer and pulled out a fresh sheet for a new entry. I printed the email and stapled it to the page. I wrote, letters careful as stitches. May 7th, 2023, 9:26 p.m. Email from Sarah. Family contact, Rick reported, no longer enrolled, plus academic-behavioral issues. Action, bring enrollment verification, change all contacts, print call logs. Then I logged into Buckeye Link, downloaded my enrollment verification PDF, name, student ID, current credits, status, full-time, good standing, and printed 3 copies, one for the file, one for the folder I would carry, one to tape inside the cover of my notebook like a talisman I could touch if my voice shook. The TV murmured in the living room like a crowd. I could feel him there, the author of a lie meant to write my epilogue. I closed my notebook, slid the documents into my bag, and stood very still in the center of my room until my breath belonged to me again. Tomorrow I would speak my own record in room 204 of Bricker Hall at 10 a.m. Documents crisp as truth in my folder. Tonight, I let the house go quiet and memorize the silence. Not as defeat, but as the second before a switch flips and the lights come on. I was ready. Finally ready. The morning of the interview, Columbus felt like it had been washed in steel. The air was cool enough to make me walk faster, the kind of spring day that still carried winter's edge, and the streets were slick with last night's rain. I had slept in fragments, waking every hour to check the clock, my mind replaying that email from Sarah like a stubborn record skip. The words, "no longer enrolled," had curled into my dreams, morphing into scenes where I arrived at Bricker Hall only to find my name crossed off the finalist list in red ink. I dressed with mechanical precision. Black slacks, pressed white blouse, hair pulled into a bun that said organized even if my heartbeat felt like a strobe light. The folder with my documents was already in my bag, tucked between my planner and the worn leather notebook where I kept my running log of incidents. When I arrived at Bricker Hall, the building's sandstone facade loomed pale against the sky, its glass doors throwing back the reflection of students hurrying to early lectures. I checked in at the front desk, the receptionist handing me a visitor badge with my name printed in black block letters. Room 204, she said with a smile that was both reassuring and official, the kind of smile that belongs to people who know the rules and follow them. The hallway smelled faintly of coffee and copier toner, and I could hear the soft whir of a printer somewhere down the corridor. When I entered the interview room, 3 people sat at a long conference table. Sarah from the email, a middle-aged man with rimless glasses and a navy suit, and Dr. Nguyen, my recommender, her eyes bright but unreadable in this formal space. "Good morning, Lena," Sarah said warmly, gesturing toward the chair across from them. "Thank you for coming in." I set my bag on the floor beside me and slid the folder onto the table. "I brought the documents you requested," I said, my voice steady. I began with the enrollment verification, letting the page rest squarely in front of Sarah so she could read the bold black line, "full-time, good standing." Her eyes flicked over it quickly, and I caught the faint lift of her eyebrows before she glanced at the others. "Excellent," she said, but I could hear the unspoken layer beneath it. This contradicts what we were told. The questions came one after another, but they were less about facts and more about me. "Tell us about a time you faced adversity in your academic journey," the man in the suit asked, his tone neutral, but his gaze sharp, measuring. I took a breath, deciding how much truth I could fit into 2 minutes without sounding like a grievance in human form. During my sophomore year, I balanced full-time coursework with 20 hours a week at the campus library while navigating a home environment that was not always supportive of my academic goals, I said. It taught me to document everything, manage my time with precision, and build a support network on campus. Dr. Nguyen's lips curved in the smallest smile, encouragement in the language of professors. When Sarah asked about leadership, I spoke about the Policy Lab project on eviction filings, how I'd coordinated data collection and analysis for a group of 6, ensuring we met deadlines even as half of us were juggling midterms. I let my hands rest on the table, palms down, to still their urge to gesture. My voice stayed level, even when the man in the suit asked, "What would you say to those who think scholarships like this should go to students without disciplinary or behavioral flags?" It was the question I had been waiting for, the shadow of Rick's lie cast into the room. I met his eyes and said, "I would say that integrity is measured by actions and records, not rumors. My academic and conduct records are clean, and I have them here if you'd like to review." I tapped the folder lightly, and Sarah nodded, flipping to a page in front of her as if confirming what she already knew. The interview lasted 47 minutes, though it felt both longer and shorter, as if time had split into two streams. One moving with the questions, one holding its breath outside the door. When it ended, Sarah walked me to the elevator. "We'll be in touch by the end of next week," she said, her voice still warm but carrying the professional distance of someone trained not to give anything away. "Thank you for clarifying the enrollment status immediately." The way she said it made me certain she'd already connected the dots about who had fed her office the false information. I thanked her, stepped into the elevator, and watched the floor numbers count down in clean red digits. Outside, the air felt lighter, though that could have been the absence of fluorescent lights. I called Mom from the bench near the oval, my voice slipping into something softer than it had been in days. "It went well," I told her. "They asked good questions." She exhaled in a way that made me realize she'd been holding her own breath since Friday. "We'll celebrate tonight," she said. "No matter what." Her voice trembled slightly on the last word, but I let it pass. I didn't tell her about the behavioral flag question. She'd hear it in my tone and carry it all day like a weight. Back home, Rick was in the living room watching sports highlights, his socked feet propped on the coffee table like he owned every surface they touched. "So, how was your big audition?" he asked without looking away from the screen. I didn't answer directly. "They seemed interested," I said, walking past him to the kitchen. "We'll know next week." He chuckled, low and dismissive. "Don't get too attached to an outcome you can't control." His words were designed to sink hooks under my skin, but I had already built armor from the morning. Firm handshakes, steady answers, the click of my pen on paper as I recorded each question in my head. That evening, Bree came over with takeout cartons of pad thai and mango sticky rice. We spread them out on my bed, my folder of documents open between us. "This is good," she said, flipping through the neatly labeled tabs. "This is almost scary good. Like they can't argue with any of this." I smiled faintly. "That's the point." She leaned back against the wall. "You know he's going to try something else, right? He won't just stop after this." The truth of it was like a cold coin in my palm. Small, heavy, undeniable. I nodded. "I know." Later, when the apartment was quiet, I sat at my desk and wrote down the day's events in the notebook, capturing not just what was said, but how it felt. The way my voice had steadied in the interview room, the flicker in Sarah's expression when she saw the enrollment verification, the precise moment I decided that waiting for a tax was no longer an option. I wasn't just collecting evidence anymore, I was building a map, and every entry was a landmark leading towards something I couldn't fully see yet, but could feel, just ahead, like the hum of a train you know is coming long before it rounds the corner. And then, at 11:42 p.m., my phone buzzed with a message I didn't expect, one that would make the week ahead far more dangerous than I'd planned. The glow of my phone screen cut through the dimness of my room like a sudden flashlight beam, sharp and impossible to ignore. It was nearly midnight, and I had been leaning back in my chair, replaying the day in my mind with the slow satisfaction of someone stacking cards into a neat, tall tower. My notebook was still open in front of me, pen balanced on the spine, when the buzz came. At first, I thought it was Bree sending a meme, or Kiran asking if I was still awake. But the name on the notification was neither. It was Sarah, the same Sarah from the Office of Scholarships and Student Aid, at this hour. The subject line read, "Follow-up, urgent clarification needed." The words pulled me upright before I even tapped to open. My heart tightened the way it does when you hear your name called in a tone that could mean praise or trouble. The email began. "Hi Lena, I'm sorry to reach out so late, but I wanted to notify you immediately of a development we encountered today. While conducting our routine final stage background checks, our office received multiple anonymous calls regarding your eligibility for the Scarlet and Gray full ride. The callers alleged that you are involved in academic dishonesty and that you have been disciplined by the university. We take such claims seriously, but please note that we have found no evidence supporting these allegations in your record. Still, for transparency, we wanted to give you the opportunity to respond should these accusations resurface during committee deliberations." I read it twice, 3 times, feeling a hot, slow wave rise up the back of my neck. Anonymous calls. Plural. Not just one person with a grudge, this was coordinated, deliberate. I could almost hear the phone ringing in Sarah's office earlier that day, the low voices feeding poison into the line, knowing that even a whiff of scandal could be enough to sway a selection committee away from me. And if Rick was bold enough to tell them I wasn't enrolled, then this had his fingerprints all over it. But the plural calls meant he wasn't acting alone. My gut twisted at the thought of who he might have enlisted. Family, someone from the building, an acquaintance I barely knew but whose loyalty had been purchased with some petty favor. I typed my reply with the precision of a deposition. Dear Sarah, thank you for informing me of this. I want to confirm unequivocally that I have never been investigated for or accused of academic dishonesty in any form, nor have I been subject to any disciplinary action by Ohio State University. My record remains in good standing, as verified by the documents I provided during my interview. I am happy to supply additional verification from the Office of Student Conduct and my department chairs if needed. I appreciate your diligence in addressing this matter transparently, and I welcome any further questions from the committee. I hit send and sat back, my fingertips still buzzing. Then I opened my binder and flipped to the newest tab, one I'd added just last week, labeled Sabotage in red marker. I printed the email immediately, sliding it into a plastic sleeve, and began a fresh log entry. May 8th, 2023, 11:44 p.m. Email from Sarah Ree. Anonymous calls alleging academic dishonesty and discipline. Office confirmed zero evidence, suspects unfounded claims. Likely origin, family contact, possible collaborators. I stapled a sticky note to the page with one word: escalation. The apartment was quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator. I thought about confronting Rick right then, waking him and asking him to look me in the eye. But the thought dissolved as quickly as it came. Anger in the moment would hand him too much. He thrived on reaction, on turning my emotion into evidence of my instability. No, I needed to keep stacking the cards, higher and higher, until the tower was so tall that when I finally pulled one piece from the bottom, the collapse would echo all the way to the people who had taken his word as truth. The next morning, I was up before my alarm, coffee in hand, scanning the campus directory for the Office of Student Conduct. At 8:07 a.m., I walked into their suite in Lincoln Tower, the carpet muffling my steps, and requested an official letter confirming my clean record. The administrator, a woman with rimless glasses and a voice like gentle authority, printed it on university letterhead while I waited. No entries at all, she said, sliding the document into a stamped envelope. Pristine. The word felt like a small, solid gem in my palm. I made 3 copies before I even left the building. Classes blurred past that day, my attention fixed on piecing together the who and how between lectures. I scrolled through my social media followers, checking for names I barely recognized, but who might have Rick's number. In my mind, I mapped the web of connections. Neighbors, distant cousins, the few times Rick had come to campus to pick me up and ended up talking to people I knew. It was like following threads through a dark maze, tugging one and listening for the sound of something shifting in the shadows. By mid-afternoon, Bree and Mateo were sitting with me in the library cafe, their laptops open but forgotten. You need to assume this isn't going to stop until you cut him off completely, Mateo said. Block every avenue he has to reach the committee, the school, anything. Bree leaned in. We could get you a new phone number, and your mailing address for official stuff could be the campus legal clinic. They'd hold mail for you. I scribbled both ideas into my notebook, my pen pressing harder than necessary. I'm already replacing him as the family contact everywhere, I said. But I want to know exactly what he said and who else said it. If I can connect the dots, it's not just defense anymore, it's proof of conspiracy. That night, after everyone else had gone to bed, I sat on my floor with the binder open, the evidence growing heavier by the day. Page after page of printouts, screenshots, and notes stared back at me, each one a quiet accusation. I ran my finger along the plastic sleeves like counting scars. And in that moment, I understood something I hadn't before. This wasn't just about keeping my scholarship. It was about setting a precedent, about making sure that if they ever tried this again, they would remember what happened the first time they underestimated me. The clock on my desk read 12:03 a.m. when my phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't Sarah. The number was blocked, the message short. Enjoy it while you can. The blocked message glowed on my screen like a neon threat in a dark alley. Just 6 words, but they pressed against my ribs as if they were trying to carve out space inside me. Enjoy it while you can. No punctuation, no emoji, no clue except the blocked number, which made it all the more deliberate. I sat there for a full minute, phone in my palm, my room so quiet I could hear the faint hum of the streetlights through my window. I could almost picture the sender somewhere in the city, phone still warm from sending it, imagining me reading it and feeling exactly the way I did now. Watched, measured, and dared. But here's the thing about fear. It's a spark, and in the right hands, it becomes fire. I didn't reply. I didn't delete it either. Instead, I took a screenshot, timestamp and all, and printed it on my small wireless printer that hummed like it knew this was important. I slid it into the sabotage tab of my binder, the plastic sleeve whispering shut over it. Then I wrote the log entry. May 9th, 2023. 12:03 a.m. Blocked message. Enjoy it while you can. Likely intimidation attempt. Context. Post anonymous calls to scholarship office. Action. Request phone records. Consider reverse lookup via campus IT. I underlined intimidation twice. The next morning, I walked into the campus IT service desk like I was just another student with a laptop issue. But my voice was steady when I asked if there was any way to trace a blocked text through my account records. The student tech behind the counter, a grad student in a faded OSU hoodie, looked at me over the top of his glasses. Officially, number. But if it's tied to harassment, you should go through campus security. They can get the carrier records. That was exactly the phrase I needed. Carrier records. I thanked him and headed straight to the campus security office, my folder under my arm like a shield. Officer Jennings, a compact man with a calm manner that made you believe he'd seen much worse, took my statement without rushing me. I laid out the timeline, Rick's lie to the scholarship office, the anonymous calls, the late-night blocked text. I could see him cataloging every detail. "You're doing the right thing by documenting this," he said, flipping through the copies I'd brought. "If there's a pattern, we'll find it. Give us your carrier info, and we'll file a formal request for the logs." I signed the release, my pen pressing hard enough to leave grooves in the paper. "If this escalates," he added, "we can discuss a protective order." The words lodged in my mind like a placeholder for a conversation I wasn't ready to have yet, but might need to. Back at the library, Bree was waiting at our usual corner table, her laptop open but untouched. "You look like you've been building a legal case," she said, half teasing, half serious. "I am building a legal case," I replied, setting down the binder. I told her about the text, about campus security, about the carrier logs. Her face tightened. "This isn't just him being petty anymore," she said. "This is coordinated, which means he has help," I finished for her. We didn't need to say who we suspected. The list was short, and every name on it was connected by blood or proximity. By late afternoon, I had an email from Sarah in my inbox, not about the threats, but about a new requirement. The committee wanted finalists to submit an additional letter from a community leader verifying our character. My pulse quickened, not because I lacked one, but because I knew what the other side would do with that window. They'd try to poison it too. I opened a blank document and began drafting my request to Ms. Harrison, the director of the campus legal aid clinic where I volunteered. She knew my work ethic, my reliability, my refusal to cut corners. If anyone could write a letter that would crush the shadow of those anonymous calls, it was her. That evening at home, the air was thick with a politeness that felt like it had been ironed flat. Rick was at the kitchen table scrolling on his phone, Kieran was at the counter doing homework, and Mom was stirring lentils on the stove. How was your day? Rick asked without looking up. Productive, I said, sliding past him to get a glass of water. He glanced up then, a flicker of something in his eyes. Annoyance? Curiosity? But it was gone before I could pin it down. Good, he said. You should enjoy these quiet evenings while they last. The phrasing was too close to the text for it to be coincidence, but I didn't flinch. I just took a sip of water, the glass cool in my hand, and walked back to my room. In the privacy of my space, I opened the binder again and looked at the growing body of proof. It wasn't just a collection anymore, it was a case file, something that could stand up in a hearing or a court if it had to. I could see the arc forming, the initial sabotage, the escalation, the intimidation, and my steady, meticulous countermeasures. They thought they were tightening the net around me, but what they didn't realize was that I was mapping every knot, learning its structure. And the more I learned, the easier it would be to cut through it in one clean move. I was still making notes when my email pinged again, this time with something I didn't expect. A forwarded message from Ms. Harrison with the subject line, "Thought you should see this." It was a copy of an email she'd received from an anonymous account earlier that day, warning her not to trust me with legal aid clients because I was under investigation for dishonesty. My jaw clenched as I read it, my mind already racing through the next steps. This wasn't just about stopping me from getting the scholarship anymore. This was about burning my credibility down to ash before I could even graduate. And for the first time, I realized I might have to go beyond defending myself. I might have to strike first. The email from Ms. Harrison sat on my screen like a piece of evidence in a courtroom exhibit, its words plain but loaded. Do not trust Lena Patel, under investigation, for dishonesty. Anonymous sender, no signature, no direct accusation I could dismantle in the moment. Just enough smoke to suggest a fire to someone who didn't know me well. I could picture the sender's smugness when they hit send, imagining the seed of doubt landing exactly where it could take root. But instead of panicking, I felt something sharpen inside me. They had crossed from undermining my scholarship into targeting my professional reputation. That was no longer petty sabotage. It was character assassination. And in the language I was learning to speak fluently, that meant escalation was not only justified, it was necessary. I called Ms. Harrison immediately, my voice steady but clipped. I want to be clear, I told her. There is no investigation, and my record is clean. You've seen my work? She didn't hesitate. I know, Lena. That's why I forwarded it to you. I've already deleted it from my inbox so it doesn't take up mental space, but I thought you'd want it for your files. She paused just slightly before files, as if she knew the binder existed even if she'd never seen it. Keep doing what you're doing here, she added. You're one of my most reliable volunteers, and one email from a ghost account isn't going to change that. Her calm, matter-of-fact tone grounded me, but the underlying rage was still there, humming just below my skin like a live wire. That night, I laid the binder open on my desk, the sabotage tab thicker than any other. I added a printout of Ms. Harrison's forwarded email, my log entry detailing the time and date, and a short list of action items in block letters. 1. Trace IP of anonymous email. 2. Request carrier logs from campus security follow-up. 3. File harassment report with university's Office of Student Life. The third item was the most strategic. While campus security could track the technical side, a report to Student Life meant this campaign against me would be officially recorded within university channels. If these attacks continued, there would be an institutional paper trail. The next morning, I was in the Office of Student Life at 9:02 a.m., binder under my arm, my voice calm as I described the chain of events to the administrator taking my statement. I didn't just give them the printed emails and text screenshot. I gave them a clean, chronological narrative of the escalation with each piece of evidence labeled and indexed. The administrator, a woman in her 40s with a sharp bob and sharper eyes, glanced through it all and said, "This is more organized than most cases we see at this stage. We'll flag this for review by the Behavioral Threat Assessment Team." The words landed like a small victory. I was no longer just defending myself in the shadows. The institution itself now had the file in its hands. Back on campus, Bree and Mateo met me at the cafe across from the library. I slid the binder across the table so they could see the newest additions. "This isn't just a smear campaign anymore," I said. "It's coordinated harassment with a clear intent to damage my academic and professional standing, which means I'm treating it like a coordinated conspiracy." Bree's eyes narrowed. "So what's your next move?" I leaned in, lowering my voice. "I'm going to catch them connecting. If Rick is working with someone else, they have to communicate. Phone calls, texts, maybe even meetings. If I can document that link, I can prove this isn't just personal animosity. It's calculated." By the end of the day, I'd already started laying the trap. I reached out to a friend in the campus IT department, someone I'd helped last semester with a research paper, and explained that I needed help setting up discreet call monitoring on my own phone account. "Totally legal," I assured him. "I just want to be able to see if certain numbers pop up repeatedly." He agreed, with the kind of curiosity tech people get when a task feels like solving a puzzle. By that evening, I had access to a dashboard where my incoming and outgoing call logs would be stored in real time, along with any blocked attempts. At home, the atmosphere was as brittle as glass. Rick was in the living room again, this time scrolling through sports news with the smug posture of someone who thought he'd already won. I didn't give him the satisfaction of small talk. Instead, I cooked dinner with my headphones in, deliberately taking up space in the kitchen until he left for the balcony. From the corner of my eye, I saw him glancing at my closed bedroom door later that night, as if he knew something in there was shifting beyond his reach. By the end of the week, the data began to flow in. Numbers, timestamps, duration of calls. And two entries caught my attention like a flash in the dark. Rick's number and another local number I didn't recognize logged in multiple calls between them on the same days Sarah's office had received the anonymous reports. I printed the log, highlighted the overlaps, and slid it into the binder. The pattern was starting to take shape, a constellation I could finally see clearly enough to map. That Friday night, as I was reviewing the call records one more time, my phone buzzed. Not a blocked number this time, but the same unknown number that had been calling Rick. My chest tightened, but I answered, pressing the phone to my ear. A female voice I didn't recognize spoke quickly, almost breathlessly. "You don't know me, but you should stop digging. It's bigger than you think." Then the line went dead. I just sat there for a moment, the dial tone in my ear, my mind already moving faster than my pulse. If they thought that call would scare me into retreating, they'd miscalculated. All it had done was tell me I was getting close. The voice from that call lingered in my mind like smoke after a match has been blown out. Breathy, hurried, the kind of cadence that doesn't belong to a stranger, making a casual threat. She had known something, maybe too much, and the fact that she'd used the phrase "bigger than you think" told me I wasn't just dealing with one or two people anymore. This was a network, small but deliberate, and its reach went beyond Rick's spite. I replayed the voice in my head as I sat on my bed, pen in hand, writing the newest log entry in my binder. May 12th, 2023, 9:14 p.m. Unknown female caller, same number tied to repeated calls with Rick. Message: "You don't know me, but you should stop digging. It's bigger than you think." Line disconnected immediately after. Tone urgent, not mocking. Possible internal dissent within group. Trace number ASAP. That last note wasn't just an instruction, it was a promise. To myself. The next morning, I took the highlighted call logs and the details of the mysterious phone number to Officer Jennings at Campus Security. He leaned over the records, tapping the printout where the dates matched the scholarship office's anonymous calls log. "That's not coincidence," he said. "I'll escalate this to the liaison at Columbus PD. With this much overlap, we can justify a trace request." His voice was calm, but his eyes told me he was starting to see this the way I did. Not as a random string of petty acts, but as a coordinated harassment campaign with intent to interfere in my academic standing. I left his office feeling the air shift around me, as if the ground under their feet was starting to soften without them realizing it. By midday, I was sitting in Thompson Library with Bree, My laptop opened to a growing spreadsheet. Every action they'd taken, every date and time, every piece of evidence had its own row. The binder was still my physical archive, but this spreadsheet was the skeleton of my case. Sortable, filterable, undeniable. Once we have the trace number's owner, Bree said, we can build the link chain. Show exactly how each lie and threat traveled from one person to another. Her voice was clipped with focus. She'd moved from being my supportive friend to acting like a paralegal on a high-stakes case, and I needed that precision right now. That afternoon, I got an email from Ms. Harrison, this time with the final draft of her character verification letter. It was 2 full pages, typed on official letterhead, every sentence a deliberate rebuttal to the insinuations floating around me. She described my hours at the clinic, my meticulous attention to detail, the ethical standards I upheld when handling sensitive client information. Reading it, I felt my spine straighten. This wasn't just a letter, it was armor, and I would carry it into that committee room like a shield they couldn't ignore. I printed 3 copies, slid them into plastic sleeves, and added them to both my binder and the scholarship folder I was building in parallel. That evening at home, the tension was sharp enough to cut with a butter knife. Rick was unusually quiet, scrolling his phone at the kitchen table, but glancing at me more than once as I moved between the fridge and the counter. I didn't speak to him. I didn't need to. My silence now wasn't about avoiding conflict. It was about letting him sit in the growing awareness that whatever he'd set in motion was slipping out of his control. Kieran noticed too. He shot me a look from his spot at the counter, one eyebrow raised in a silent question I couldn't answer yet. Mom's gaze flickered between us, sensing the undercurrent but not ready to wade into it. 2 days later, the trace results came in from Jennings. The unknown number was registered to a prepaid phone purchased in cash from a corner store less than a mile from our apartment. That should have been the end of the trail. But Jennings had something better. The store's security footage from the day of purchase. The timestamp matched, and the grainy black and white video showed a woman at the counter, a woman I recognized instantly. She was one of Rick's co-workers from the auto shop, someone I'd seen at their holiday barbecue last year, laughing with him over beers. The sight of her face on that screen clicked something into place. She was his runner. The one making the calls he couldn't make without drawing suspicion back to himself. I printed the still frame, highlighted her face, and slid it into the binder under a new sub-tab labeled Known Associates. Underneath, I wrote, Direct link between Rick and harassment campaign. Witness confirmation possible via store clerk. This was no longer a vague accusation. I had visual proof. Now the question was how to present it in a way that would both protect my scholarship and trigger consequences for them that couldn't be dodged or downplayed. The next move had to be surgical. I emailed Sarah at the scholarship office requesting a follow-up meeting before final committee deliberations to provide new evidence relevant to my candidacy. I didn't attach anything yet. I wanted to hand it over in person, to look them in the eyes as I laid it out piece by piece. If I timed it right, they'd have no choice but to address not just my eligibility, but the malicious interference I could now prove. That night, as I reviewed my notes, a thought lodged in my mind and wouldn't leave. If I could dismantle their lies in a public enough way, I could do more than keep my scholarship. I could flip the script entirely, turning every step they'd taken against me into the very proof that would isolate them. I just needed one more confirmation, one more link between the woman in the footage and the calls to Sarah's office. And that confirmation was going to come sooner than they thought, because I had just found a way to make them reveal it themselves. The plan started forming that same night, while the still frame of Rick's coworker from the corner store flickered in my mind like a playing card flipped between fingers. I couldn't just hand the footage over and hope the committee connected the dots. They needed to see the entire web, spun out in front of them so completely that there would be no room for doubt. But to make it airtight, I needed one final piece. Her voice on record, tied directly to the lies about me. The calls to Sarah's office had been anonymous, the text threats untraceable in tone. What I needed was a conversation that left no space for interpretation. 2 mornings later, I found myself in the cafe across from campus with Bree and Mateo. our table littered with empty coffee cups and my open binder. "So, you're basically going to catfish the saboteur," Mateo said, tapping the still image of the coworker. "Not exactly," I replied. "I'm going to give her the rope, and she's going to tie the knot herself." Bree raised an eyebrow. "You're sure she'll talk?" I nodded. People like her don't expect pushback. They expect fear. And fear makes people quiet. I'm not going to give her fear. The setup was simple on the surface. Using a new prepaid phone registered under a neutral name, I'd send a short message to her number. Something vague enough to hook her, but specific enough to make her think I was part of their inner circle. The draft on my notepad read, "Need update before she hears. Did you get through this week?" If she took the bait, her reply might confirm timing, actions, or even mention Rick outright. Bree leaned in. "This is good. Just remember, don't push too hard or she'll smell the trap." I bought the phone that afternoon from a different corner store on the far side of campus, paying in cash and walking out with it already powered on. The number programmed into my contacts was just Target. My hands didn't shake as I typed the message and hit send. Instead, I felt the cold clarity of someone stepping onto the exact square they'd chosen in a chess match. 10 minutes later, the phone buzzed. Her reply was short, but golden. "Yeah." Called twice. Told them she's lying about everything. He says the committee will drop her after Monday. My pulse quickened, not because of the threat, but because of the slip. He says, she had just confirmed coordination with Rick in her own words. I saved the message, exported it to my laptop, and printed it with the timestamp and number visible. It went straight into the binder under known associates, right beside the security footage still. Underneath, I wrote in careful block letters, "Direct confirmation of collaboration between Rick and name redacted for case. Content explicitly references false statements to scholarship committee and intent to influence outcome." The following Monday, I walked into Bricker Hall for my follow-up meeting with Sarah. The air in the hallway smelled faintly of paper and coffee, and the hum of distant printers was the only sound as I stepped into her office. She greeted me with the same measured warmth as before, but I could see the flicker of curiosity in her eyes. "You said you had new information?" she asked, gesturing for me to sit. I placed the binder on the desk between us and opened it to the tab I'd prepared. I laid it out piece by piece. The anonymous calls, the text messages, the character letter from Ms. Harrison, the call log patterns, the traced prepaid phone, the security footage still, and finally, the printed text from the coworker confirming her role and Rick's direct involvement. I narrated as I went, my voice steady, each page landing on the desk with a quiet, deliberate weight. Sarah didn't interrupt. She just read, her brow knitting tighter with each turn of the plastic sleeves. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then she closed the binder gently. "Lena," she said, her voice lower now, "this is not just relevant to your candidacy. This is a clear case of malicious interference in a university process. The committee will see this before any final decision is made." She paused, holding my gaze. "And I will be forwarding this to the Office of Student Life and our legal counsel." The relief that washed through me wasn't the giddy kind. It was the deep, bone-level release that comes from knowing the tide has finally turned in your favor. Back outside, the sky was heavy with the threat of rain, but the air felt lighter than it had in weeks. Bree met me at the steps, reading my expression instantly. "You got them," she said. I didn't answer, just let the smallest smile tug at the corner of my mouth. The truth was, this wasn't over. The scholarship was still in the committee's hands, and Rick had no idea yet that I dismantled his entire operation from the inside out. That evening at home, dinner was quiet again, but now the silence belonged to me. Rick glanced at me once across the table, a question in his eyes he didn't dare ask. I met his look without flinching, letting the pause hang long enough for him to know that something had shifted. In my room later, I wrote the final log entry for the day. May 15th, 2023. Evidence presented to Scholarship Office. Committee informed. Case referred to Student Life and Legal Counsel. Target identified and linked to Rick via direct message confirmation. Outcome pending. I closed the binder and placed it on my desk, my fingers resting on the cover for a moment. I had built this case one piece at a time, and now it was ready to stand without me holding it up. Somewhere deep down, I knew the next knock wouldn't just be opportunity, it would be the sound of consequences arriving on someone else's doorstep. And I was ready to answer it when it came.